Today we're glad to be joined by Brian Kleber and Ajon Rose to talk about starting an arts-related business and information for entrepreneurs. I've passed out, actually, one of your two blue sheets is announcements and events for the Waldron Arts Center coming up. I thought I'd just briefly go over those. Coming up, we have a downtown gallery walk, which will be Friday, December 2nd. Also that weekend is the Crazy Quilt of Bloomington Songs here at the Waldron. Our Holiday Art Mart and Cash and Carry will continue through December 24th, so if you haven't gotten a chance, go and check that out. There's some great items down there. Also, especially for artists, we're now accepting applications for the 2006 Limestone Sculpture Symposium, and proposals are also now being accepted for the 26th Annual Arts Fair on the Square. So be sure to check out our website for more information on that. We have online forms that can be downloaded. Also, we have a couple of special meetings that are coming up. There'll be a grant workshop for the IAC Individual Artist Project Grants. And if you have any questions, Nancy can answer all your questions about that. We're also going to have a meeting to discuss possibilities for a collaborative art project for Arts Week in February. And also, if you belong to an arts organization, we'll be having a Creative Connections brainstorming session to talk about the arts climate here in Bloomington and get together and network. That is coming up on December 6th. We just had a meeting to discuss upcoming Artists After Hours for the coming year. We won't have one in December due to the holidays, but starting in January, we're going to have a session on how to get published for all you writers out there. We'll also, coinciding with Arts Week in February, we'll have an Artists After Hours entitled Visioning Our Town, Designing the Bloomington Arts Community of the Future, so that should be kind of an interesting one. In March, we're going to have an Artists After Hours on risk management, how to protect your art, your patrons, yourself. We'll discuss liability, personal insurance, things like that. In April, we're going to feature copyright law for musicians, kind of as a sequel to copyright law for artists that we did previously. And then we're going to have another session on marketing, on education, on the government. So we have a full year coming up, and we hope to see you there. I think that's about it. At the end of the session, be sure to fill out your feedback survey because it helps us serve you better. It's one of the reasons we have cats recording today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ajon Rose and Brian Kleber. Give them a hand.
Make sure we talk into this. Recording. How's everybody? I'm used to standing up, so this is going to be a little weird. I have to control myself and sit down. So I appreciate the Bloomington Area Arts Council inviting both myself and Ajon. And Ajon and I met to plan for this, and we exchanged a couple of emails. So I think how we're going to handle this is I'm going to talk, and I think Ajon's exact words is he's going to chime in where he feels he can be intelligent and add something to it. So I'm going to lead off today's discussion. I would encourage you, though, to have questions and ask them if you do have them. It's really important to do that. And before I do get a little more about myself, I want to congratulate the Area Arts Council. I think this is a great event. We're very supportive of my role as a small business development center to have these kind of events and get together every industry, every aspect, and this is a great thing that you guys are doing, and thanks for coming out on this cold evening. A little about myself, just for you know who I am. I'm Brian Kleber. I'm the director of the Small Business Development Center. Who's heard of the SBDC or Small Business? Great. You never know some of the audiences. We are actually 20 years old, an organization here in Bloomington, and just a little about us. Our core function is that we do counseling and training for small business owners. We work with every type of business, and that's really important. As you as artists, we have artist business, we have technology business, retail business, whatever. What we know and my staff knows is the business side of business. We don't claim to know the industries or the product or services. It's about the marketing, you heard earlier, the taxes, the cash flow, those different types of things. That's what we bring to the table. And that's what most of you guys need. You're very good artists. There are very good plumbers out there, very good everything out there, but a lot of people don't have the business side of the business, and that's what we help with. Majority of our services are for free. So I do encourage you to leverage what we do. 10% some specialty things that we do charge for some small amounts, but most of what you want to come in and talk to one of my staff and a business advisor, go through marketing issues, figure out how to start your business or expand your business, that is a free service, and I encourage you to leverage that. The reason for that's free is a lot of our funders is the community. The City of Bloomington funds us. We'll be getting some county funds, Chamber, Economic Development Corporation, and others. I always forget because I lived there most of my life. Where are we located? We are located just north of the square in the North Showers building. So if you know where City Hall's at, which I'm sure you do, paying those tickets and things like that, the north side of that building is the IU Research Park, and we're located there. So that's just a brief overview about the Small Business Development Center. And I'm going to go over one other organization and then talk about in business in general and how to start a business and what to think about, and Ajon will probably chime in at that point. Another organization that's not really known in this community is an organization called Seed Corp. Anybody ever heard of this one? My gosh, you guys are good. Seed Corp was actually founded in 1997 by 5 other organizations in this community. Middle Way House, the Urban Enterprise Association, City of Bloomington, SBDC, and Bank One at the time, to do two different purposes. One was to do a business planning course, and I have literature, and I'll pass out here a little later. We provide a business planning course for all types of businesses twice a year. It's in the spring or in the fall. It's a 12-week course, and part of that course is about business feasibility, because most of you start, if you don't have a business already, is should I even do this as a business, or is it a part-time business, or should it just be a hobby? And that's what that really addresses. Where should you fall within this? And then we get into business planning. Okay, are you serious about this, whatever stage that is, and what do you need to do? And that's the planning part. But more importantly, probably most of you in this room and most of the small business owners, is this organization can actually do funding of businesses. And we call these more character-based loans. So if you don't have the credit or the collateral or the cash or things like that to go to the bank, a traditional loan, where most businesses get their money to start up, you can come to an organization like Seed Corp, and we can fund you through an application process up to $35,000. So it's a traditional type of loan like a bank. It's a 5-year term, a lot of statistics I won't tell you about. It's on our website. But it is a great alternative for if you're looking to start your business, specifically in a small business, don't have the resources to go to the bank, to utilize these type of things. So that's a little about the two organizations, if everybody gets on the same page of what I represent. I'm going to turn over to Ajon just to tell you a little about Textillery and where he's coming from. If you don't know, heaven forbid you don't know Ajon. And then I'll come back and talk a little about business and feasibility and what you should be thinking about probably.
Textillery, my wife Judith and I started the business in 1978. We lived in Brown County. I'd come to Bloomington for grad school, and after grad school was either get a job or start a business. So we decided to start a business. Judith is really the artist in the of the couple. She does all the design work for our product, and we basically do hand weaving, primarily blankets or throws and upholstery fabric yardage. But we've always said what we are fundamentally is weavers, and we'll really weave anything, but at this point it's primarily throws and upholstery yardage. We started, like I say, in 1978. We had a neighbor in Nashville that was a painter and said to us, this is the last summer I was in grad school, that her landlord would be glad to rent us like a 10 by 10 square piece of ground out in their courtyard, and that's what we did. And everybody around us said, well, if you can just hold out to October, you might actually see some customers. And we had some big $15, $20, $30 weekends over the summer, but sure enough, this was a time in Nashville, which I think some people I know out there can attest to, that once the leaves were down in November, people really closed their doors. It was cheaper not to turn on the lights than to try and maintain your store. But sure enough, October came along, and a whole different crowd, and lots of them came by. And I was done with school, and I sat out there during the week, and we actually made a little bit of money and had the opportunity to do a show in Columbus in the Commons. And that sort of got us started, and I think we did the craft show at the Union that year and met a few of Bloomington artists, and some of whom we're still real good friends with, which is really fun. And got to, heard about craft fairs and that way of doing things. And so we just sort of took that route of making stuff during the week and getting in the car on the weekends and doing craft fairs. I suppose we were, unlike a lot of the people we knew here, we tended to branch a little further out and headed out east, did shows in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and farther places away than other people. We came to the conclusion pretty early on that there were stores that could sell our product better than we could. Textiles were particularly difficult, and I don't know, any of you who are out there that are textile artists know that it's really tough. Yeah, in the summer it's too hot, and textiles and rain is not a really good mix. And, put the plastic up, take the plastic down. But you learned a lot, and through some of those retail shows, we got a few wholesale clients, and there was one Christmas where we'd gotten into really great shows, and I was flying, driving back and forth. Judith was flying in and flying home, and at the end of the Christmas season, we looked back and determined that had we stayed home and filled the orders that we had instead of canceling them, we probably would have made more money than all the traveling we did. And at that point, we sort of went cold turkey and decided we were in the wholesale business, and did the Baltimore Winter Market and started doing other wholesale shows and started doing more commercial trade shows, gift shows, and then gradually started doing the furniture market in High Point. And our business has just grown and evolved from there. But I think to the theme of this evening, I always looked at it totally from a business standpoint. I like to think I brought a little creativity to the table, but I'm really a numbers person. And for the first 10, 12 years of our business, Judith was really on the production side of the wall, and I was on the administrative side of the wall. And I think one of the big advantages that we had, and that if you can possibly figure out a way to do it, is to have two people that can work for the price of one. And that's sort of what we did. We didn't have kids at that point, and we were able to, if we skipped a dinner here or there, it wasn't a problem. That all changes when you have a family. But that's really the way we got started. But I think what always differentiated us along the way was that we really treated it very much like a business. And even though Judith is the artist, she was an economics major in college, so there were some knockdown, drag-out battles, but she understood it fundamentally. So, and I guess the other thing I would say before Brian gets back involved is we've always tried to take advantage of the kind of advice and resources that are available through places like the SBDC, the Bloomington Economic Development Corporation. There's a SCORE. There's a lot of great advice out there, and a lot of people that are really eager to help, and they really do get a kick out of helping creative people. You just have to be receptive to what they're offering. Brian?
I guess one of the things I want to touch on with this group briefly, and then kind of open up to the conversation, because I'm sure you have questions. No matter what type of business you're starting, one of the first things that we start with in our office, specifically if it's a startup business, is really looking at yourself and deciding, what do you guys want to be? And answering that question. And it's really, really hard sometimes. And what I mean by that is, do you really want to be in business? And do you understand what that takes? I know Ajon has the same kind of view in some sense, because it's a hard decision. Some people aren't made to be in business. But if you are made to go into business, you're interested in that, and that can be a part-time business or whatever, there's a way to go into business. And that's how we can help you through that way. We've worked, quite honestly, with a lot of artists over the years. We've worked with a lot of startup artists. Most of our time right now is we're working with some of the largest, I think, artists in the town that are trying to expand and to grow. I can tell you just from personal experience, and you're not alone if you're thinking, well, I don't know business. Most people don't know business. Artists aren't alone. Again, utilizing the resources and the information available from our office, other offices around the city and the state, we can be your business side. We can help you on that. And to go through that feasibility and kind of be that business side, I have a couple resources I'll pass out at the end tonight. But one of them is actually I'm going to give you, I give free things away. You didn't bring throws. Is a CD-ROM, and I encourage you to pick one of these up when you leave. But this is basically a feasibility. And quite honestly, it goes over 4 different things. I'm going to touch on 2 of them, but the first one is looking at that personal side of you. I have as a rule of thumb, if you're not happy at home, you're not going to be happy at work. If you're not happy at work, you're not going to be happy at home. So you've got to like what you do. And it has to relate to your own personal goals and ambitions in your life. And I'll give you an example of that. I have a client, one of many, that has issues with current political environments. But they're part of their client base maybe does things for or is a client for those initiatives in our country. And so they have this battle. Well, should I take that client as a client or should I not? Because they're doing something towards maybe something they don't agree with. And it's one of those things. How do you rest within your business and within yourself? And that client's decision was actually to take part of the profits from that job and to donate it to the counter nonprofit for that business, for that initiative. So that's one example. But really looking at you personally, how do you fit in this business and what are your strengths and weaknesses? The second thing that I think every business has a problem with is your market. And we hear market. We've had sessions, I'm sure, on marketing. But in reality is, how are you going to sell what you make? No matter what it is, how are you really going to get that sold? John, he packed up the car and drove. And that's one way to do it. If you make no matter what, if I make this CD-ROM, if I make a painting or whatever, just because I make it does not mean someone's going to buy it. You've got to get it out there, and you've got it in front of people. I mean, I'm sure we've all experienced that now as we all laugh. And we've all probably learned that. But we have this philosophy because it's ours, and it's our creation, no matter what it is that, everybody's going to love this, and everybody's going to pay a lot of money for it. And that's not necessarily true. And so you got to figure out, who really is your market, and how are you going to get it to them? I mean, that's the implementation part of it. We do a lot of research, and I'm sure we all hate doing research. Oh my gosh, figure out who that person is and how to get to it, the galleries or whatever else. We always forget, though, then how are you actually going to do that? How are you going to spend those hours on the road, commuting back and forth? Again, how does that affect your marriage, your family, things like that, to be gone? And so really marketing is another area. And of course, we talk about numbers and things like that. I'm not going to talk about that tonight because that's one of the hardest things for any business owner. But really need to look at those first 2 things. The second kind of comment I'll make, and I'll turn it over for additional comments from John, is I would encourage all of you, beyond the assistance from our office and others, is to find a mentor. A mentor can be the most invaluable person you ever meet and become friends with. And there's a lot of great people in this community that have done great things, that want to give back to local small business owners and entrepreneurs, and are willing to do that. You'd be surprised. There's also ways to do it through trade associations or online forums even nowadays. You can find people in the same industries or whatever across the country. You'll find the common theme. People want to help. These people you want to become mentors with have been in your shoes before. They were the startup. They were facing the problems you're facing right now. They want to help. They want to see you succeed. Of course, they don't want, competitors right next door to each other. You might have an issue with that. But someone who's in a different industry or maybe a few blocks away really, really want to help you succeed. We're all in it for the community, and we want to make that happen. So find a mentor. We can help do that if you don't have the contacts, but also just talking to other people is really critical.
I'll get a couple responses to some of the things that Brian said. Talking about becoming a business, I think sometimes people tend to equate a business with lots of people. And I think one person can be a business just as easily as 35 people can be a business. And I don't think committing to making your craft or your art a business necessarily means that you're committing to becoming a large studio or a factory, as Judith and I have decided to do. I think you more decide what your fundamental goals are. I think Brian alluded to that with your business, and then figure out how you can make what you do fit within that. And there have been a number of times over the years where Judith and I have faced decisions about the business And we go back to, one of the, what we call the prime directives. In our case, it's that we didn't want to work for anybody else. So, whether it's a big customer that's going to become half of your business, in which case you are working for that person, or whether it's somebody wanting to buy your business and then you work for them, I think those are the kinds of decisions you have to look at. And if you want to be small and be the producer, then I think that's real legitimate. You just have to figure out how to make that work so that you can show a profit. Brian talked about just because you make it, somebody should buy it. We all know that's not the case. On the other hand, somebody has to pay for the time and energy that went into the making of that. And I think that's one of the fundamental principles when you go to pricing your work. You have to factor in the ones that aren't good. I remember back when we'd have wall hangings along the side of the booth, and people would come in, and I'd be holding them out, and I like this one, I don't like this, and they say, I really like that one, but why is it so much more expensive? I said, because that's the good one. and I think we all face that in our art, is that not every piece comes out is the masterpiece. And so when you get a good one, you have to charge for that, and you have to factor in what doesn't work. Then the other comment I would make is in regards to Brian talking about mentoring. I think it's what's really important to remember in building an association or relationship with a mentor or other people is it's about sharing. It's not about taking. And I'm always happy to sit down, even with a direct competitor, if we have an exchange of information and an exchange of ideas. What I don't like is when somebody calls up on the phone and says, I want to start a weaving business, can you tell me how to do it? That's not fair. But I think there's opportunity for exchange. One of the things that when we go to trade shows, we have independent sales reps that are on the road selling our product, and they help us at the trade shows, working with their customers and people that come in the booth or in the showroom. One of the things that I find really valuable about that 5 days or a week that we're spending at a trade show is the opportunity to have interchange with other people that have similar businesses. And it's just, I'll go in and I'll complain about banking relationships and find out that 3 or 4 other people down the aisle from me have all had exactly the same situation happen to them. And it's comforting, and it's nice to commiserate with someone and then, go back and get to work. And I think that's one of the really important things about get-togethers like this. And it's something that I've been involved with the Arts Council for a number of years, and it's one of the things that we learned in our current strategic planning session and in our early ones is that what artists are looking for is an opportunity to exchange information. So again, I think it's about sharing, it's not about taking.
Ditto that, and then one last thing. I know it's my last 2 things or one last thing. Whenever I teach a class, I give my students one final word of advice. Send them off after 12 weeks to do their business or whatever. And that final piece of advice is the people that are successful, and you guys, again, define what success is. If it's one person or it's a part-time job or whatever that is that needs to fit in your life, are the ones that are persistent. And also the ones that ask questions. I always tell people, we don't know what you don't know. We can give you a lot of information. We can give you a lot of resources and guidance, but you had to ask. We have general basic stuff we'll go over, but you do have to ask. I think we're having Snow White rehearsals or something like that. I forget what's going on out there. But you do need to ask, and don't be afraid to. Someone will find the answer for you. Don't call our office. We'll find the answer. It might take us a little while. It's our job, though. Another resource I would just throw out there that's overlooked a lot of times in our community, which I'm a big advocate of right now, is our library. That's their job, is to help and answer questions as well, especially the reference librarian. They can really help you as well. So I would like to open it up to questions. And anything's game. Anybody wants to share examples or experiences as well, feel free to throw them out there.
I just would like
We're going to have a mic come around, sorry.
I'll just walk around Oprah style.
I hope I get this question right the first time. I just wanted to ask Ajon, did you have a point where you had a revelation about how to price your work? Did it kind of evolve? Or when you started on the square in Brown County, were you just winging it or getting as much as you could?
Certainly early on, a lot of it's just winging it. But there was a certain revelation, particularly happened when people started asking to buy wholesale from us. And I'm sure, you know, everybody has faced it when you're at a show, when a store comes by and says, I'd like to buy your product to put in my store or in my gallery, and they're expecting to pay half of what you have marked on it. And, you know, one of the edges that an artist or a craftsperson has at a show is that they can sell for less than what maybe a gallery would sell retail, because your overhead is different and you're the direct producer. So you've eliminated that, you know, that middle step. So like I say, that's a little bit of the edge that you have on the street. But for a gallery owner, they don't want to compete with you, and if you look at believe me, if you look at what it costs them to be in business, you can certainly understand why they have to, in essence, double the price. So what we used to do is, when we went to a show, I like to say, okay, I'll take my sales at that show, cut it in half, because if I was basically a dealer, I would have to buy that work from somebody for half of what I was selling it for. Then, so the first step is to cut it in half, then subtract from that your expenses of, you know, your show fee, your booth fee, your travel expenses, and then your cost of materials, and then is there anything left over? So I guess that was the first real revelation for us, was trying to figure out whether we were really making any money by selling what we were selling it for at the fair level. You know, and then the next time it really hit us was when we started to take on sales reps, who in the industry that we're all in are going to probably want 15% commission from a wholesale price. So there you are faced again with having to add another layer into your pricing. So you have to have a real sharp pencil from a production standpoint, but I think more importantly, you got to have a product that people really want and look past the price. Does that answer?
That's excellent help. It's a great start.
I'm going to comment one more thing on that. We have a client in town that manufactures art pieces, and recently went through and asked them, how do you figure out the pricing on these? Well, I think that's what it priced for. I think that's what it should sell for. And that's part of the pricing formula, but there are more structured ways of defining that, and we can help on that. There are some basic formulas. Now, it's not the end-all to pricing. You have to look at what the industry is doing and things like that, but there are ways to, if you need a more formalized visual, there are ways to do that.
Depends on size, and of course I have reproductions of my work, so there's prints. Do you sell everything that's the same size at the same price regardless of the quality of the original?
Yes, but we're not selling any of our product as original. At the same time, we're selling everything as original, because it's all produced in the studio. So, you know, it's still time and materials, you know, plus overhead. And then it goes back to what I said earlier about, you know, part of that overhead is pricing in what doesn't work. So, you know, we have a lot of designs that we'll introduce over the course of a season that we may never actually make. So, you know, there's the initial prototype, which in our case, it's not a huge cost. I mean, it's labor, because, you know, we can run basically anywhere from 25 to 50 yards at a time on a setup. And obviously, the more yards you run on a given setup, the more you're amortizing that cost of setup into the product, and so the cheaper that becomes. So the prototypes are expensive to do, but the cost of prototyping is figured into the whole cost of everything we sell. So theoretically, a throw of a particular construction It doesn't matter what color it is, it's going to be the same price.
On that same thing, what if you have two objects of equal size, but one took twice the amount of hours to produce? So then you would price them different?
It would be priced higher.
Okay.
I mean, we kind of have know a figure for labor, and then, materials is real exact. Labor is a little more amorphous, because it depends on the weaver, and of course, the weavers that are faster get paid a little bit more money than the weavers that aren't as fast. Our business has really evolved in the last 5 years. There was a time when we were probably selling 95% to retail stores or galleries. And now our business is almost just about only half selling to stores and galleries, and the other half is doing upholstery fabric and selling to hotels. And, selling to one hotel, when we can do, 400 or 500 of the same thing, we can make money because we get good at it. And it's, and what's interesting about it is, for Judith, it is almost more gratifying work than designing for the stores, because we're working with really good interior designers that are real definitive in their taste, and when you make them happy, they're really happy. So that's really fun for Judith as a designer. So I think that's another thing that you want to look at with what you do, is finding areas where you can leverage what you're good at. We found that the Chinese got really good at making the same product we did for a whole lot less money, because their labor was less and their material cost was less. So we had to find that different marketplace where we could leverage what it is we're good at, which is design, personal service, giving the customer what they want when they want it.
Brian, when an artist would come to you for help in starting a business, do you recommend that they do put together a business plan, and do you sit down with them one-on-one to do that, or just give them a template or a resource and say, fill this out and come back? How do you handle that?
I probably shouldn't be employed if I don't say you should do a business plan. But on the other side of that, some case it doesn't make sense, depending. Most cases, yes. I want to put that disclaimer in there. As far as we deal with it, we see about 600 clients a year. So that's a lot of people, and it's good. Bloomington is the second highest productivity area in our state for SBDCs, and that says something about our community as entrepreneurs and such. We will try to put people through more of a process, because in reality, the business planning process is a process. We will meet with you one-on-one, though, but we will give you, what we try to use actually is an online plan tool that was designed just for our office, that we can interact with you. And I find it actually is better, because we can respond and get back to you faster, because you can email us directly or send us a link, and we can, within minutes, if we're in, respond, not having to wait a week or two to schedule an appointment to come in and show you something. So we try to get you through the initial 75% of the plan that way, and then we'll try to then really sit down with you and to formalize it. With the existing businesses, or if you get started in the business, it really depends on the needs. I tell our clients, no matter what kind of client you are, we're looking for a marriage and not a divorce. And we have clients that I talk to on a daily basis. They're growing and they have issues and they want to bounce it off somebody, or have specific issues. There are clients we meet with just on a quarterly basis, and there are clients we hear every couple years from have an issue. So it's really up to the client. We're just trying to be here, be helpful to them, and do whatever we can to make them succeed.
I think it's not about the business plan. I mean, that's just a tool for measurement or for focusing. It's more about how you're planning to run your business. And Brian talks about Seed Corp, which and I've sat on the loan committee for Seed Corp for a few loans, and it is definitely character based. But yet one of the tools for evaluating, what's of prime importance is if Seed Corp or a bank or anybody is going to lend you money, they want to know that they're going to get paid back. And one of the tools for proving to someone or making a case that you're going to be able to pay them back is to show them in black and white that, you know, if it costs me this to make and I sell it for that and it costs me this much to do that sale, there's that much left over for me to repay that loan. But at the same time, I don't think you can live your life by that business plan because, you know, things change every day. And you know, we're creative people, and what it's about, first of all, what gives us our gratification for doing what we do is exploring that creative process. You just need to make a living at the same time. So I think like I say, it's not about the plan. The plan is just a part of how you run your business.
Just one more comment on that. Whenever I talk about business planning, I usually say there's 4 reasons for a plan, blah, blah, blah. Won't get into those. But one of them that most people don't think about, which I will bring up, beyond the measurement and things that Ajon talked about, it's reality for most entrepreneurs, small business owners. It's a communications tool. Everybody has an idea and something in their head. They want to do it. We don't communicate very well to the people we're asking for money from, our employees, our accountants, our attorneys, people like that need to understand our business, understand what's going on. So it changes. It's gonna be wrong the day you put it down in front of us because something has changed. But in reality, though, it does get the baseline of communication, get you focused, get your a goal in mind, and hopefully you reach that goal or change to reach that goal.
You said all of us are creative. How do you go about finding a product that your consumer is going to want? So you've developed something, you think it's really great, and you go to a show and nothing happens.
Been there.
So is it a matter, I mean, is it just truly trial and error, or do you need to be asking the consumer, do you need to be asking them questions? What they would want or what they see or what they don't see in the product that you've made. How do you find out what the consumer wants so therefore that they can appreciate the art and you can reap your rewards?
I think it's both. I mean, it certainly is a lot of trial and error, and I think when you hit on something that gets a response, then you want to step back and figure out how can I do more of that, what can I do with that, how can I evolve that to continue to get that response. But I think a real important element of it is you're asking the customer to buy a piece of you. And, I've always, we still refer to Textillery. I mean, it depends what environment I'm in, but as far as I'm concerned, it's still a studio. It's 37,000 square feet, and there's 35 people working there, but it's still a studio, and that's the attitude that we still try to get across to people is that, and everything that goes out of there still has a sewn-in tag on it that says Rose. It's a piece of us, and I think that's what, so when you're at a show and trying to develop that product, it is that interchange with the consumer, and it's not sitting back behind the wall and waiting for them to point and say, I'll take that one off the wall. It's really interacting. I mean, it's sales. I mean, you can cloud it any way you want, but people want that personality. Otherwise they'll get on the internet and buy it.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's say you have a group of artisans and you're doing shows, and not all of them have the sales ability. They're really introverted. How do you approach those artists to say, okay, let's have some sales training? Are you going to offend them? Would a lot of artists be offended if you try to say, hey, John, you need to interact with the customer and explain why they like that? Because a lot of times they don't realize they know they like the products until you start telling them about the product, and then they develop an appreciation. So how can you handle talking to a group of artists that they all need sales techniques and to be better at their sales? How can you sharpen their skills without offending them? How can you bring that up to them?
Well, I think it's reality. And I mean, and I think Brian, part of what he talked about in his beginning comments were. Oh, yeah, one of the things that Brian talked about was you have to look at yourself, you know, before you want to, you know, if you want to make a living I shouldn't say that because that's a generalization. I think one of the important things to consider about making a living as an artist is how much of your personality are you willing to share. And maybe if you're not somebody that wants to be involved in that customer contact, you would be better off working for somebody else and practicing your art because
Represent your product for you. Okay, so don't hold back. Just say, hey, look, you know, we all need to sharpen our skills, and here's my idea, and this is what I think we need to do. And the ones that get offended and walk away, well, okay, we'll find somebody else to, right? I mean,
yeah,
I mean,
and you know, and Judith and I found that we communicated better with store owners than we did with the consumers in the streets, and so that's one of the reasons why we evolved our business. So there's different kinds of people out there that you can relate to on different levels, and that store owner or the buyer for, you know, for a large store, you know, has just as much taste and just as much appreciation for the art as the consumer who's going to hang it in their house. So I think it's a lot of it's finding the best avenue and the people that you can communicate with best. And if you really don't want to communicate with people, then I think you have to decide that I'm not going to stand out in the streets and drive myself crazy. I'm going to find a different way to practice my art.
One more comment on that, and then we'll move on. Bottom line is you have to love what you do. And if you don't like sales, then no matter what you're selling, you're not going to sell very well. If you're interested, there's a lot of communities around the country that have put together different programs to kind of to solve that issue in some sense. There's things that, and I know this community has talked about arts incubators and arts groups coming together to do shows together, support, and this mechanisms, and there's that research is out there and some really interesting models that's been creative, so.
My wife and I have run into problems selling art on the internet because we would like advertise the pieces for less than the galleries that were handling our work, and then the galleries would find out and get upset. Have you run into that kind of thing?
We don't really sell our work on the internet. I mean, we have our catalog online. You can go to www.textillery.com and you can see everything that we do. And we have a phone number. We don't put prices on. And if somebody calls us and wants to buy the product, the first thing we do is offer to refer them to a store in their area. You know, obviously there's a lot of places in this country where we don't have a store, and then we're willing to sell it to them at basically about a 2.1 or 2.2 markup from what the wholesale price is. And we've stuck to that in an effort to protect our customers. But I think that there is less and less of that resistance or response from stores out there now. I think the internet, you know, 5-10 years ago when the internet first started to appear, the quote-unquote bricks and mortar stores really were very, very concerned about. And what we always tell people is if you want to see it first, if you want to touch it first, then there's a very good reason to go to the store. And the other thing you get with the store is if you go in and you buy it and you take it home and it doesn't look right, odds are the store is going to take it back. Odds are I'm not going to.
The comment was made, I mean, you guys sell yourself, and that's just almost anything. I mean, you're selling you, and your art's part of that. Same thing, internet versus retail scenario. They are buying the shop as well, that reputation, that customer service. So you have to understand that.
Well, and I think if you look at internet sites out there, the better sites that give you better information, that give you more choices, that are, you know, more legitimate, they're not that much less expensive than buying it in that bricks and mortar store. I mean, again, it goes down to those, you know, keeps coming back to those damn business principles that, you know, you have to cover the cost of being in business and to maintain a website and to maintain a presence and to be there to answer the phone costs money.
I have a gallery that contacted, one of my galleries contacted me and said, we're building a new website, and are you interested in doing reciprocal linking? So this is an opportunity. I mean, obviously, in the world, we're going to have to work together. So this is an opportunity for, I said, sure, and they would put my link on there, and if people were in my area, but then I would refer people who were in their whole other part of the country to go to their store. Or if I got a commission based on somebody that had been in their store, that was the deal, was, the honesty between people. So that's a whole other kind of approach too.
I had a question, I have lots of questions, but I have a question about an arts service type business. And what I mean is art installation, a tile, or custom clothier, or any business like that where you're actually doing a clientele business. You're not selling a particular product. You're doing a business that is based on service of some kind. What I want to know is, how do you do market research for this community to find out if it's large enough to support such a service that way? And do you help with that?
Yes, and yes. No, there are a couple different things, and we need to focus a little more on exactly what you're talking about.
My own idea is a custom clothier for people who are difficult to fit and buy stylish clothes.
Okay. There's a lot of ways to go about that, and I'll give you the 101 version, but it doesn't work always, okay? Typically, there are trade associations out there, which we haven't plugged too much, but those are great resources, and they have some general information on who that buyer would be, who that general end customer is going to be, what it's going to look like, how much they're going to earn, what they're going to think, what they're going to do, all that type of stuff. Then we can take that information and bounce off of local census data and also local spending patterns. We have a resource in our office called ESRI. Don't ask me what it stands for, I have no clue. It does, though, buying patterns for any location in the United States and what people buy, when they buy, and opportunities in the market that maybe exist in different industries, as well as all the demographics, things like that. So we take you through that process. It's part of the business planning process in some sense, or the feasibility. You'll get the CD, and it goes down to pretty systematical. Then you have to do a gut check. I mean, there's kind of a math formula or a process. Then you got to sit back and say, hey, does this really make sense or not? And talk to other people. It's not, there's no list out there. I get phone calls in my office. Hey, tell me what Bloomington needs. You have to take each idea and go through that process. We don't have a list. We can guess, but we don't have that list. Any other questions? We'll make you walk back and forth all.
That's all right. That's what I'm here for.
We came in a little late, but what I was curious about was managers or agents, and how does that whole system work, or are you familiar, either one of you familiar with that? Where I know someone else that's in the same profession as I am, they hire a manager. I mean, he is not a people person, he hires a manager. I have no clue on how that whole system works, and how do you go about finding one?
I think there's good ones and I think there's bad ones. And I think there's ones that work and ones that don't work. And I think, I would say the same thing about sales reps. I mean, over the 15 or 20 years that we've had, and our sales reps they don't work for Textillery, they're independent manufacturers reps that typically handle, 4 to 10 different lines. And, there's a lot of really good ones out there. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes they have the right relationships with the right kind of customers, and sometimes they don't get it. Sometimes we've had people that are really good salespeople come and say, well, if you'd only give me this tool, or you'd only give me that tool, or you'd only give me this, I could go out and make lots of sales for you. Then we have other people that come in, they take the tools that we give them, which are little pieces of fabric like this, and they go out and they write really nice orders. You either get it or you don't get it. And so I think, there's definitely managers out there, and I think that's a really good approach if you are, like you say, perhaps not a people person, and that's not really what you want to be. What you have to be prepared to understand is that the manager is entitled to be paid for what they're doing, and so you have to figure that into the equation.
One more thing there. And this is one of the times that you would ask questions because I've seen so many businesses get in scenarios that they've gone with the agent, manufacturer's rep, whatever, and lo and behold, that agreement they just signed is for territory for 5 years, and there's no accountability if they don't sell anything, that they don't get that territory back. Thus, now that business is out of being able to sell their product in that territory because that manufacturer's rep is not selling. So those are the questions, and mentors, our office can kind of walk you through,
I think that's
what's in there.
That's really, really important. I always used to say, beware of the person that walks into your booth and tells you how much money he's going to make for you. It just doesn't work that way.
My question's on this very same line. Back when you were talking about selling your stuff, I was in marketing for many years, and I can sell other things, but like you said, whenever you're producing something, you're making a piece of art, you really are selling yourself, and that's next to impossible for me to do. I could sell everyone else's art in the room, but I just cannot sell my own stuff. And so I've thought about the possibility of going with an agent, but how do you find, well, two questions. How would you find a good agent? And the second question is, as a small business, starting up, is it very feasible to go in that direction in the beginning?
Well, as I said, for us, it was an evolution. I mean, we did it ourselves, and, we always found that I love it when we go to, like, the gift show in New York and set up our booth, and then I hear all the people around me complaining about it. I said, you don't know what it's like to show up at 6 o'clock in the morning and put up your framework and put up your tent and then put the plastic up and take the plastic down and then tear it down that night and come back the next morning and do it again. So I again, like I say, for us, it was an evolution. We started off doing it ourselves, and we found that the sales reps came to us. Actually, I think our first sales rep, we ran an ad. We took a triptych wall hanging and hung it up in a friend of ours' house in Brown County, took a picture of it and put an ad in, I think it was Gifts and Decorative Accessories, which is a trade publication. And we got a phone call from a rep in Dallas, and he said, I'm a sales rep in Dallas, I'd like to sell your work. I said, okay, what's a sales rep? And we started with it, and it ended up not working out, but we went, we learned, we met other people and talked to other people and said, well, why don't you talk to this person? They're good at that, or they have these kinds of connections. So it's, there's a lot of avenues. There's a couple major marketplaces. Atlanta has a huge market facility that twice a year they put on major markets that last a week, 10 days. And it's 3 buildings that are full of showrooms, each showroom the size of the auditorium here, and they sell multiple lines, and it's there's a lot of people that take their samples or take their portfolio and go down there during market and go from showroom to showroom to showroom until they find someone that's willing to give it a try. And you just never know what the right fit is. So there's a number of different ways to approach it. Trade publications, as Brian says, and a lot of it's just doing yourself and learning by trial and error.
Other just side comment, general rule of advice on any kind of professional service, and I would categorize that instead of professional service, ask your peers, ask who they like, who they don't like. Don't open up the yellow pages, please.
Along the same line of a sales rep, what is common for a sales rep to ask? Is there a certain percentage they ask? Is there a certain time agreement that, is reasonable to expect that they represent you? What are the sales reps like that you have?
There are probably as many arrangements as there are companies and people out there. In the gift industry, and I would have to say that gift and home furnishings and the accessory side of home furnishings, which I would have to assume all of us are, somewhat what involved in. The average commission is 15%. You will find some that will want more. I mean, what I've seen lately is the showrooms that have a big showroom overhead are looking for 20% now because that's what it's costing them to be in business. What theoretically you would get with somebody like that is better exposure and a more active showroom. And again, if you were walk through the Atlanta Mart during market, you would see some showrooms are packed and busy with people and other showrooms aren't.
Would it be an advantage for an artist to be a little bit more proactive? In other words, to have their own plan for how they could work with a rep, or
I think you have to know your limitations, and you have to know your pricing structure and what you can and can't afford. And I think sometimes you have to decide you're willing to take a risk, and other times I think Brian's advice on being very careful what you sign is really important. I mean, we've always tried to get it on the table up front. Part of what happens is the first couple times around, you don't know what to put on the table. So, I mean, so there's a certain amount of just faith there that you have to, I think, have faith in the person that you're dealing with. And again, I think that's a place where the SBDC or SCORE, SCORE is a really good organization as well. I mean, you've got people that have, basically are retired. SCORE is the Service Corps of Retired Executives, and it's retired people who are there basically, again, it's a free service to help you, and they'll look at things like that, and they'll look at that agreement. And we basically never sign rep agreements because all it does is get you into trouble. We did a licensing deal once, and I had the contract, I went through it, and I made all these changes, and we talked them through. And after the meeting, I said, well, Betty, I guess I need to run this by my lawyer. And she said, we don't need to waste money with the lawyers. If you're not making any money, or I'm not making any money, then we don't need to pursue the agreement anymore. And I said, fine. That's the kind of relationship I want to have. I mean, we're all Midwesterners. We sort of grew up on the handshake. And I think if you're, I think it's really critical, the personal aspect of it. If you're not comfortable with the person you're shaking hands with, then, it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better.
You've talked a couple of times about how your business has evolved. You've mentioned that a few times, and you've talked about how you meet with people on a yearly or maybe every 5 years or whatever. And in terms of setting up a business and being in it for a long time, do you have any expectation of a period of time where it just sort of it flows along as you thought it should, and you're not having to prep for the next evolution of it, or is it just kind of a constant process of churning?
15, 20 years ago, I thought that was going to happen, but in this day and age, it really doesn't. And and I talk about sharing with peers. I mean, I talk to people all the time that have been in business as long as we have, and we all sort of had this expectation: we're going to get into our mid-50s, and we're just going to be able to get up and sort of do our thing, and it's going to be cool. And the world just isn't working that way anymore. And so, no. I mean, so I think going back to what Brian said, and certainly going back to our prime directive, you better really like what you do.
Well, maybe that's a hectic way to end, but I think we should probably start our networking and mingling and carry over these questions to the next session. And Nancy, did you have something?
With Promise Joe, you could say just a few words about his invitation.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to invite you next week at the Rose Fire Bay. I'm doing a project with Arts Week, and the title is Our Town. I thought it was a great theme, since it's kind of a town gown sort of place. I'm actually meeting in two different places. I'm meeting here, and I'm also meeting at IU to try to get some students involved on that end, as well as faculty. So I'd love for you to come here and give some ideas about that theme, and we're going to be doing the project sometime in January. So thank you.
And all the information on that can be found on the blue event sheet that we passed out at the beginning. So stick around. I think Brian has some things that he can pass out to you, some more information. And we'll look forward to seeing you in January. Also come to all of our holiday events. They should be not to miss. So thanks a lot. Thanks again to Ajan and Brian.